Hello, I'm Michael Keenan, Conference Director of TIDES. I'm here in Long Beach, California, with over 850 attendees from 30 countries around the world. TIDES covers the latest developments in oligonucleotide and peptide therapeutics, from discovery all the way through to manufacturing. Some of our speakers this week have agreed to share their insights with you on the development of oligonucleotide and peptide therapeutics. Please enjoy the presentations.
My name's Rodney Lax. I'm a business consultant. I have worked in the peptide industry for about 30 years, starting in 1986. In 2014, I retired and became an independent consultant. Since then, I've been working for the PolyPeptide Group and for NCPEP in the Netherlands. If you're talking about peptides, basically we're talking about polypeptides which have less than 50 amino acids. Over the last 20 to 30 years, of course, we've seen a lot of new peptide therapeutics being approved. We've been adding them at a rate of about 2 to 3 a year. We've also seen the quantities of peptides which are being manufactured going up considerably. The continual annual growth rate has been about 7.6 for approved peptide therapeutics. And of course, there have been changes in the way we make peptides as well. There haven't really been enormous changes in the chemistry. If you're looking at shorter peptides, say peptides less than 10 amino acids, it's probably going to be a choice between solution phase and solid phase. If it's above 10 amino acids, you're probably going to be using FMOC-based solid phase synthesis technology, although there is still some peptides being manufactured using TBOC technology. What we've also seen is that recombinant expression has become a method of manufacturing peptides. There are peptides like calcitonin, PTH, BNP, and one or two others which are shorter than 50 amino acids, but which are made recombinantly. One of the things we do notice is that there is an enormous reluctance with the industry to change technology. So it's really quite surprising when you think that FMOC technology is much safer and much more flexible than TBOC chemistry. But we still have a number of peptides being made by TBOC chemistry. And the reason for that, it's partly the reluctance to change to other methodology, because our knowledge base is with the previous technology which has been out there. It's also the cost of raw materials. FMOC amino acids were much more expensive than TBOC amino acids when the technology was first introduced. But a lot of it is due to the reluctance of sponsors to actually change technology, because if the product's approved, it means that they have to re-register the product. And some of these products, there may be 30 or 50 registrations, and each registration change could cost $500,000 to $1 million. So you can understand the reluctance to move from one technology to another. And that, of course, is telling us something. It's telling us that we're unlikely to see any major changes in the near future. And it wouldn't surprise me if FMOC chemistry was the method of choice in 30 or 50 years' time, but unfortunately, I won't be around to see that. Obviously, there are still challenges out there for FMOC chemistry. I think aggregation and general solubility of peptides is one of the major issues. But apart from that, I think we are dealing with the challenges as they come along. We've certainly seen great improvement in raw materials and reagents, in equipment, in the quality of chromatographic media, and I think that will go on improving. I think the main challenges to the industry, rather than to peptide chemistry itself, are what I would call paper challenges. Changes in the guidelines for GMP compliance and for regulatory affairs. Also tightening of specifications for the final products. I think these are all things which are evolving. Unfortunately, or fortunately maybe I should say, as far as analytics are concerned, the analytical expectations of our sponsors and the regulatory organizations are very much driven by the analytical equipment that's available. So if analytical technology improves, everybody expects to see that being carried over into the quality of the product. And of course, every time we tighten specifications, we actually lower yields and we increase costs. And the whole industry's got a lot more complex. Certainly 10 years ago, the manufacturing process was very much one of a customer coming to us, we giving a proposal, that maybe being accepted, and then us making the peptide, and we would not see the customer for maybe 4 or 5 months, and then when the product was finished, we would give the customer a call and deliver the product. It's very different nowadays. Usually we go through several cycles of quite complex proposals. There's an enormous amount of customer CMO interaction during the manufacturing time, often bi-weekly or weekly telephone conferences. They visit the CMO regularly, and certainly it's not unusual for a CMO to have 2 and sometimes 3 different customers on site in a week, and that is an enormous drain on human resources. And of course, every time you talk to your customer, you're going to have new ideas, so you're always dealing with scope creep, and that didn't used to happen. As far as peptide therapeutics are concerned, we live in an age of globalization, but unfortunately, the guidelines for acceptance of peptide therapeutics are very local, and that means a lot of extra work for our regulatory affairs departments. I don't really think I can address discovery. That is not my field. But of course, there are a lot of peptides out there. There are about 7,000 known peptides, and it is estimated that there are 10 million proteins in the biosphere. And of course, they can all obviously be used to mine for new peptide therapeutics. And we have a very active discovery and development industry, which has numerous technologies for screening, discovering, and developing those peptides. What I do see is that there is going to be a growing need for longer peptides. The reason for that is there are many molecules, such as antibody-drug conjugates, fusion proteins which contain unnatural amino acids, and post-translationally modified proteins that cannot be manufactured using recombinant technology. And what I think we're going to see is that we're going to enter an age of chemical protein synthesis, where we make proteins from peptide fragments, which of course would be generated by FMOC chemistry, and these will be coupled in either to other peptide fragments or to proteins. And I think this is where the industry is going to go. So I think we're going to see a meshing of the chemical industry, chemical peptide manufacturing industry, recombinant expression, probably chemoenzymatic approaches, and maybe other approaches as well. But all these industries in the past have really been regarded as separate industries, and I think in the next 5 to 10 years we're going to see a lot of these either coming together or a meshing of the technologies, so that companies which do have these technologies work with each other to produce this type of product. Of course, there are 2 reasons why our customers are asking for lower cost peptides. I mean, the first is they're asking per se, they just want a lower cost because everybody wants everything cheaper. But there is also a real reason why some peptides do need to be offered at lower cost, and that is because the technologies they're being used for example, if it was oral administration of the peptide, they do require larger quantities of peptides. I mean, typically for oral bioavailability, it could be anything between 0.5% to 10% of the dosage you would be given if you were injecting it. So how do we go around accommodating those requirements? Well, if it's a long peptide and you need it in large quantities and it doesn't contain unnatural amino acids, obviously recombinant technology is the way to go. It would depend on the peptide and it will depend on the quantities. But typically the quantities you'd be looking for would be 50 kilograms and above. If it's chemistry, because you're looking at very small quantities, maybe a couple of kilograms of the peptide, there are 1 or 2 things that you really have to realize about what's been going on in this industry. Prices have gone down. If you look at generic peptides over the course of 15 years, the prices of generic peptides have on average dropped by 50%. At the same time, the costs of the industry have been going up. Solvent costs have gone up by 10 to more than 100% depending on the solvent. Labor costs have gone up 10 to 15%. Cost of living has gone up 37% during that time. The whole process of manufacturing peptides from a regulatory GMP compliance standpoint has got much, much more complex. So there is much, much more labor involved than previously. The only cost which has really gone down, it's gone down very substantially during those 15 years, is the cost of FMOC amino acids. And they cost about 40% of what they cost 15 years ago. But what people have to realize is that the contribution that raw materials make to the final cost of the product is really very low unless you're manufacturing very large quantities of the peptide. So typically for peptides less than, say, a kilogram or 2 kilograms of the product, probably the raw materials aren't going to make up 10% of your costs. The real cost is labor. And the only way to avoid, to bring the cost of labor down, of course, is to take your manufacturing to countries where labor is considerably cheaper, but that is associated with many risks. Now, I think this is something which affects all contract manufacturing industries, not just the peptide industry. Certainly in the peptide industry, if you look what has happened over the last 30 years, we've been losing one major peptide CMO every 2 years, and we've been adding one maybe every 4 years. So we've seen an enormous attrition in the industry. And this is extremely dangerous because you're not just losing companies, you're losing know-how and expertise. And certainly for the CMOs in Europe and in North America, of course, we have put enormous emphasis on selling not just the product, but the quality and the services and the know-how. And we think that is a winning argument for dealing with that. But there are no cheap fixes to lower cost peptides. All that happens, if you demand lower cost, you'll probably find somebody who will survive it. But the end result is, and there's a presidential election going on here, and everybody's very worried about losing American jobs to the rest of the world. Well, we're all responsible for that because we're always looking for the cheap deal.